Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, in partnership with the FishSA, as well as major fishing corporations and the SA Fishing Development Fund, are distributing over 10,000 food parcels to distressed small-scale and interim relief fishers across the country. Now, for more on the relief, I'm joined on the line by Environment, Forestry and Fisheries Minister, Minister Barbara Creecy. A very good afternoon to you, Minister Creecy. Perhaps let's find out what the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown has had, and the impact what that has been on fisheries around the country, specifically considering that fisheries was deemed an essential service and did not actually go under lockdown.
Yes, greetings to you and of course to all of your viewers sitting at home. Well, as you say, fisheries has been an essential service throughout. But I think what is important to understand is that for those who would be involved in the abalone sector and also the West Coast rock lobster sector, those particular fisher people were badly affected from, in fact, January this year, when the restaurant trade in China closed down and they effectively lost their export market. And the consequence was that the price of rock lobster plummeted. And so those fishers were not engaged in that activity. Subsequent to that, while many of the commercial fishing companies would have continued throughout the lockdown, and many small-scale fisher people would have continued to fish, I think the key problem that the small-scale fishers face is that the restaurant trade in South Africa has been closed since the lockdown began. And that means that most of the market where these small-scale people would have sold is not available to them at the moment. Of course, they can fish for own consumption and for household food security, but that obviously doesn't mean that they are able to monetize their catches, and this, of course, has had fairly dire economic consequences for them.
Now, as mentioned in the introduction, your ministry, as well as various stakeholders, plan to distribute 10,000 food packages to those in the fishing industry. Already, so far, you've distributed about 1,500 to various areas. Tell us about your strategy and how you plan to roll that out.
Well, our target group is those who are registered with the department and who have licenses, either on the interim relief basis, which would cover the Western Cape, or as small-scale fishing people who would be members of cooperatives in the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. So what we are going to be doing is distributing food parcels to these individuals. We have our own network through our decentralized offices, where these fishermen are used to being in touch with us, and we are partnering. It's really our private sector partners who have been generous enough to donate these parcels, and we are working together with a range of voluntary organizations to ensure transportation and distribution, both to households and also to individuals who would come and collect on the basis of notification. You know, we're very concerned that this should be done in a way which protects the dignity of those involved and should not expose them to any risk of queuing or anything like that would put them at risk from the virus itself.
And that's a very good point that you bring up, Minister, because we have seen that in as much as various organizations are giving out food parcels, and even though they go out beforehand and have designated lists of people who are going to be beneficiaries of these food parcels, when the distribution actually happens, you find a whole lot more people coming and queuing in very, very long queues. How do you plan to mitigate that and make sure that that is not the case, especially because distributing from a central point is also part of your distribution strategy?
Yes, I mean, we are going to have to be careful about that, and we're going to have to make sure that, as I say, we interface with the families involved, and we give them notification. You would know that we've been involved in a fairly major exercise through our national parks as well, and in that instance we have been delivering directly to homes. We found that that's a good strategy, and I think in this situation we will be taking advice and discussion with the cooperatives involved on what would be the best mechanism to ensure that our distribution is dignified and doesn't raise false hopes amongst those who are not targets of this particular benefit.
And Minister Creecy, what would you say have been the take-out learnings from distributing food parcels and food vouchers to the waste pickers? Because that's also an exercise that you're involved in.
Well, I think let me just say that it's really important to say that in the level 4 regulations, informal waste collectors are now allowed to operate, and really we're very grateful that provision has been included in the regulations, because although we had innovative ways of distributing, we did physical food parcel delivery, but we also had the system of delivering a voucher directly to a cell phone. We did find that there are always individuals who are excluded through that kind of process, and obviously it's not a substitute for people being able to engage in the activities related to their livelihood.
And before I let you go, on another issue related to the fishing licenses, some were meant to expire during the lockdown period. What is the status quo on that?
At the time when the initial lockdown was declared, we did give everybody a 3-month extension. So those with their current licenses would still have that extension. We are busy discussing at the moment a comprehensive directive that we will be issuing on all aspects of our work in terms of level 4, and I'm sure that fishing people will be notified as to exactly how we're going to be handling the permitting issue. There is, as you would see in the level 4 regulations, there is an opportunity for licensing and permitting offices to open. What we have to be looking at is exactly how that will happen, so that we are neither endangering our staff nor members of the public. If we feel that it's not possible and set of conditions, then obviously we may have to give a further extension for those who would be affected.
So you are saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, that that extension has now officially kicked in because the offices are open?
No, the extension was a 3-month extension, so we're only in the 6th week of that 3-month period, so people would still have another 6 weeks to go. The issue that we are now considering is what we do when the 3-month period expires, and do we give a further extension or do we find a safe way to open our permitting offices?
All right. Thank you so much, Minister Barbara Creecy. And before I let you go, now that the waste pickers are able to do their job, are they still receiving those vouchers electronically?
That was, as I've explained, it was a private sector initiative, and I know that the glass recycling sector is continuing to support their waste reclaimers, and the reason they're doing that is because there is a decrease in the demand for glass bottles, and they feel that there will be continued hardship for the glass reclaiming sector. I think for other sectors at this stage there is an anticipation that they will be moving back to, I think they're allowed to operate at 50% capacity. So I think that once we reach that level, we'll have to take a decision as to what would be the impact on the reclaimers. Obviously, we also have the option to be putting those reclaimers on, because we now have a fairly significant database. We would be in a position to be putting that database forward for the social distress relief, which national government is offering to those who don't receive any other grant or benefit from government.
Well, we thank you so much for your time as well as your update. That's Minister Barbara Creecy, Minister of Environment, Forestries and Fisheries, on the distribution of food parcels for those in the fishing industry. It is a phased-out process. Already 1,500 have been distributed, and on the 4th of May and the 11th of May, it will move to other provinces and other areas as well.